I never imagined how my life would pan out. This is my story, and my name is Rita. I was raised by kind farmers who instilled in me the importance of diligence and hard work. We've been taking care of the crops and animals before dawn since the day I was able to walk. Back then, life was easy. I would attend school, return home, and assist with farm chores. On the weekends, family time and household tasks were prioritized. I had no desire to learn any different, and I didn't know any. That is, until I graduated from high school. Bless their hearts, my parents desired for me something greater than a life raised on a farm. One evening, as we were sitting around the dinner table, Dad said, "Rita, we've been talking. Your mom and I think you should go to college." And my world suddenly became larger. I moved to the city, which was so unlike anything I had ever experienced that it might as well have been another planet, after packing my luggage. It was an experience going to college. The people were the ones who truly opened my eyes, even though the classes were rather fascinating. Children with aspirations and dreams I'd never even contemplated, from all walks of life. And Jack was there after that. In my second year, I got to know him. He was quite different from the country guys back home. He was charming and self-assured. I assumed Jack knew exactly what he wanted out of life. He would add, while reclining on the grass outside the library, "Life's too short to waste it working yourself to the bone. We should enjoy ourselves while we're young." I was enamored. This person didn't view life as a never-ending list of tasks, but rather as an exciting journey. As soon as we started dating, we were discussing marriage. My folks were wary when I told them. They were eager to get to know Jack, the man who had won their daughter over. After Jack's first visit to the farm, Dad remarked, "He seems nice enough, but there's something... I don't know. Rita, just use caution." I dismissed his worries. What was my traditional father's knowledge of contemporary love? We were going to have the best life together, and Jack was wonderful. Bless them, my parents covered the cost of our wedding and even purchased us a city apartment. Mom murmured, "We want you to have a good start." "Mom, thank you." I gave them a strong hug and said, "Dad, I promise I'll make you proud." I felt like my life was set when Jack and I stood at the altar exchanging rings and vows. I had a loving husband, a solid job in the city, and a promising future. Our marriage was good for the first few years, at least I thought so. Jack and I established a pattern since we both worked in the city. But when I look back, I can see the fissures that were beginning to grow even then. "Rita, do we have to go to your parents' farm this weekend?" Every time I offered a visit, Jack would complain. "It smells like manure, and your dad always wants me to help with something." I would sigh and attempt to talk him down. "They're my family, Jack, and they've done so much for us." He would complain, "Okay, fine, but I'm not shoveling any cow crap." I dismissed it as the squeamishness of a city lad. I had grown up with those scents and chores after all. I'm not sure if I should have taken it as a warning sign, though. I became pregnant 2 years into our marriage. My parents were ecstatic, and I was giddy with excitement. "A grandchild!" Mom cried into the phone. "Oh, Rita, we're so happy for you." Jack responded with less vigor. "A child already? I suppose that's all right." I put it down to nervousness. He would undoubtedly get used to the notion of becoming a father. Bless their hearts, my parents never stopped helping us. They paid for our holidays and the automobile we bought. Though Jack seemed to take it all for granted, I was still appreciative. He would respond, "Of course they're helping us. That's what parents do." I fell in love all over again with our kid Tommy. However, Jack, well, he tried. That's what I'll give him. However, he wasn't naturally suited to be a father. When Tommy wailed at night, he'd whine, "Can't you keep that kid quiet? Some of us have to work in the morning." Biting my tongue, I would tell myself that we were both getting used to being parents. Life continued. Whenever we could, Jack and I would go to the farm, but his resistance increased with each visit. "Your dad asked me to help fix the tractor again," he'd say. "I'm not a mechanic, for Christ's sake." I used to see my dad and Jack labor together. They were filthy and covered in perspiration. Jack would grimace and fumble with the tools, while Dad would be patient and explain every step. And then something terrible happened. My parents both died within a year. I was inconsolable. I wept into Jack's shoulder. "They're gone. It's unbelievable that they're no longer with us." He gave me an uneasy back pat. "Everything will work out. They did leave the farm, at least." His remarks startled me. The farm was my family's legacy, and Jack was preoccupied with what we had inherited. While I was grieving, Jack revealed something shocking. One evening over dinner, he stated, "We should sell the farm. We could buy a big house in the city, live like kings." I was weary from loss and the rigors of parenthood, and I wanted to debate and fight for my family's legacy. Furthermore, wasn't a wife meant to back her husband's choices? I mutely said, "Okay, if you think it's best." And just like that, my family's history was sold to the highest bidder, with only a few signatures on some documents. Jack felt like a child in a candy store as soon as the money was deposited into our joint account. He cried, "We're set for life, Rita. Enough working long hours. We are free to do what we like." I tried to ignore the hollow feeling in my chest as I nodded and grinned. Jack wanted this, and I was his wife. I mean, I had to help him. Life was not the same when the farm was sold. I'll give Jack that the proceeds from the sale provided a great cushion for us. We were no longer required to labor as hard. It seemed like we were living the dream for a while when we both reduced our hours to part-time. But as time passed, I became aware of some things. Jack appeared to lose all motivation, despite never having been a hard worker in the first place. He would abruptly leave positions at any time, always providing a justification. He would say, "That boss was a jerk." Their expectations were excessive. "You realize that I'm not a slave." I made an effort to reason with him. "Jack, the money from the farm isn't going to last forever. We must consider our future." He would dismiss me with a wave. "Slow down, Rita. We have all we need for life. Why should we exhaust ourselves so much?" Tommy, our son, was rapidly maturing in the meantime. After completing his education in high school and college, he was working and living alone before I realized it. Though I missed having him around, I was proud of him. Then one day, while I was leafing through the newspaper, I noticed a name. It was an article about Robert, Jack's uncle, who ran a prosperous concrete production factory. "Jack," I yelled, "did you see this article about your Uncle Robert?" Jack got serious. He yelled, "I don't want to hear about that old tyrant." I was aware of the tale, or at least Jack's telling of it, about how his uncle had taken care of him when his parents passed away when he was a small child. Robert had been trying to push Jack into the family business in an obtrusive and domineering manner. Jack used to tell me, "He never listened to what I wanted, years ago. It was always about what he thought was best, so I left and started my own life." I couldn't help but wonder if there was more to the story as I looked at Jack now, relaxing in his robe at 2 p.m. I softly said, "Maybe it's time to make peace. Jack, it has been years. Individuals evolve." Jack's reaction was explosive. "Make peace with that control freak? No way in hell, Rita. Drop it." I let it go, but the incident left me unsettled. There was so much anger there, so much resentment. It made me wonder what else Jack was carrying around, what other parts of himself he was hiding. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when I overheard Jack on the phone. His voice was curt and dismissive. "I am not interested in his life, and it does not concern me," he said sharply before hanging up. My curiosity got the better of me. Who was that, honey? Jack's face was a mask of indifference. Hospital. My uncle's sick. If he kicks the bucket, at least I'll finally get something out of him. I stared at him, shocked. Jack, that's a terrible thing to say. He raised you. Yeah, and made my life hell, he snapped. I'm not going to see him. End of story. As I watched Jack settle back into his armchair, remote in hand, something inside me snapped. This wasn't the man I married. This wasn't the person I thought I knew. Without a word to Jack, I went to our bedroom and called Tommy. Hey, sweetie, I said when he picked up. How would you feel about meeting your great-uncle? Tommy was surprised but agreed readily. An hour later, we were walking into the hospital, my heart pounding. The ICU was a maze of beeping machines and hushed voices, and there, in a bed surrounded by monitors, lay Jack's Uncle Robert. He looked small and frail, nothing like the tyrannical figure Jack had described. When we introduced ourselves, his eyes filled with tears. Rita, Tommy, he said, his voice weak but warm. Oh, I've wanted to meet you for so long. Over the next hour, Robert told us his side of the story, how he'd taken Jack in after his parents died and raised him as his own. I loved that boy, Robert said, his voice cracking. I wanted him to have everything, to carry on the family business, to have a good life. But Jack, it seemed, had other ideas. He said he didn't want the responsibility, Robert continued. Said he didn't want to work hard Staying up nights worrying about the business, I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach as Robert's words painted a picture I recognized all too well. Jack demanded I sell the business, Robert said, shaking his head. He wanted me to set him up with a monthly allowance, an apartment, a car. Said I owed him a carefree life. I glanced at Tommy, seeing my own shock mirrored in his face. I told him that's not how life works. Robert went on. That money needs to be earned. I begged him to stay, to learn the business, but he just got angry. He said he'd find a rich wife and never have to work a day in his life. As I sat there in Uncle Robert's hospital room, memories from the past decade started flooding back, like pieces of a puzzle finally falling into place. I saw our life together in a new, harsh light. Jack had never held a job for long. He always chose part-time work, called in sick often, and took countless days off. I had attributed it to stress, to him being a free spirit. But now I saw the truth. Life is for pleasure, Rita, he'd always say. Why kill ourselves working? I felt sick to my stomach as realization dawned. Jack hadn't married me for love. He'd married me for my family's money, for the comfortable life he thought I could provide. I was just a means to an end, the rich bride he promised his uncle he'd find. Tears welled up in my eyes as the weight of this truth settled on me. Our whole life together, our marriage, our family, it was all built on a lie. Uncle Robert's voice pulled me from my thoughts. I'm so sorry, he said, his voice weak. I won't be able to leave any to you or Tommy. I wanted to, but it's okay, I said, squeezing his hand. We don't need anything. I had plans, Robert continued, growing agitated. A new project. It would have changed everything, but I ran out of time. Suddenly, Robert's face contorted in pain. The machines around him started beeping urgently. You need to leave, a nurse said, rushing in. Now. A few days later, the call came. Uncle Robert had passed away. When I told Jack, his reaction made my blood run cold. Finally, he exclaimed, a grin spreading across his face. Took the old bastard long enough. I stared at him, disgusted. Jack, he was your uncle. He raised you. He waved dismissively. Yeah, so when's the funeral? Do we have to go to that? In the end, Jack didn't attend. Tommy and I organized the funeral ourselves. a small, dignified affair that I hoped would have made Uncle Robert proud. While I was grieving for a man I'd barely known, my husband was at home gleefully calculating his newfound wealth. "The factory's got to be worth at least $10 million, I heard him saying on the phone when I got home. "Can you believe it? I'm rich." I watched him strut around our house, boasting about his inheritance, and felt nothing but revulsion. This wasn't the man I thought I'd married. This was a stranger wearing my husband's face. And then things got worse. "You know, Rita," Jack said one evening, his eyes cold, "you're getting kind of old for me. I think I'm ready for an upgrade." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Excuse me?" He shrugged, not even bothering to look ashamed. "You heard me. I'm rich now. I can do better." Over the next few weeks, Jack's behavior became increasingly erratic. He'd stay out late, coming home in the early hours, reeking of booze and perfume. More than once, I spotted lipstick stains on his collar each time. I confronted him. He'd brush me off. "Mind your own business," he'd smear. "You should be grateful I come home at all." As I lay awake one night, listening to Jack stumble in at 3 a.m., I realized something had to change. I couldn't keep living like this. I deserved better. But more importantly, I needed to know the truth about everything. About Jack. About the inheritance. About the life I thought we'd built together. One morning, after another night of Jack stumbling in at dawn, I'd had enough. "Where were you?" I demanded, my voice shaking with anger and hurt. Jack smeared his bloodshot eyes, narrowing them. "None of your damn business, Rita. You should be grateful I come back at all." I recoiled as if I'd been slapped. "Grateful? Is that what you think our marriage is?" He ignored my question, instead fixing me with a calculating look. "Say, how much is left from your parents' inheritance? We must have some savings, right?" The sudden change of topic threw me off guard. "What, Jack? We've spent it all. The accounts are empty." His face twisted into an ugly mask of disgust. "Empty? You've got to be kidding me." He paced the room, muttering to himself. Then he turned back to me, his eyes cold. "Well, I guess that's it then. I'm done here, done with you." Before I could respond, the front door opened. Tommy walked in, his eyes widening as he took in the scene. Jack's demeanor changed instantly. He plastered on a fake smile and approached our son. "Tommy, my boy, just the person I wanted to see. I need you to sign something for me." He produced a document from his pocket, thrusting it at Tommy. "It's just a formality. You're renouncing any claim to Uncle Robert's estate. Since there's no will, it all comes to me anyway." Tommy glanced at me, confusion clear on his face. But after my nod, he took the paper and signed it without hesitation. Jack's grin was triumphant as he snatched back the document. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, he turned back to me, all pretense gone. "I want a divorce," he announced, his voice cold and flat. "I never loved you, Rita. I just tolerated you for your parents' money. But now I'm rich. I don't need you anymore." The words hit me like physical blows. Even though I'd suspected it, hearing it laid out so brutally was different. "I'm moving to Uncle Robert's house," Jack continued, already pulling out a suitcase. "Don't try to contact me, it's over." And just like that, he was gone. 30 years of marriage packed away in a suitcase, and he walked out the door. I stood there frozen, trying to process what had just happened. It felt surreal, like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. "Mom?" Tommy's voice was soft, concerned. "Mom, are you okay?" I turned to my son, my rock, and felt the dam break. Tears streamed down my face as Tommy wrapped his arms around me. "It's okay, Mom," he murmured, holding me tight. "We'll get through this. You're strong. You'll be okay." As I clung to my son, sobbing into his shoulder, A small part of me marveled at the man he'd become. Kind, compassionate, everything his father was not. And I realized something. "You're the best thing he ever did," I whispered to Tommy. "The only good thing to come out of this marriage." Tommy squeezed me tighter, and in that moment, I knew that no matter what happened next, I had my son, so I wasn't alone in this, and we could tackle any challenge together. The weeks that followed Jack's death were a haze of suffering and shock. It was difficult for me to keep my head up and concentrate on going forward, especially since Jack appeared intent on showing me off his newfound freedom. First came the Facebook posts, which overflowed Jack's account with images of Uncle Robert's mansion, which is currently his new residence. I made an effort to ignore it and concentrate on getting better, but the pictures soon changed. They began to show a young woman. She was attractive, blonde, and only a little older than our son. Jack was embracing her in one picture as they both smiled for the camera. My stomach turned when I saw the caption, "Introducing Candy, my fiancé, completed the upgrade." The calls began almost immediately. I was asked questions by friends, acquaintances, and even Tommy's former instructors, which I was hesitant to respond to. "Hello, Rita, is everything all right? It was Jack who posted. What is happening? Are Jack and you both for real?" The humiliation and the continual reminders of Jack's treachery were too much for me to handle. It was excessive. And so, I took a step that I never would have taken. I wanted to meet, so I called Jack. Upon seeking legal advice, the day of the appointment finally arrived. With my divorce papers in hand, I waited at our former favorite cafe. With Candy on his arm, Jack strode in. She was probably no older than 25, her makeup heavily applied, and she was laughing at something Jack had murmured in her ear. I responded, well, Jack," as he brought out a chair for Candy. "If the old ball and chain isn't the cause, meet Rita, the starter wife, Candy, honey." My blood boiled at Candy's pitying gaze, but I remained composed. I remarked, "Slip the divorce papers over the table." "I have the divorce papers here." "The house is all I'm asking for. Everything else is yours to retain." I was shocked to see that he took up the pen without protest. "All right, take your tiny abode. These days, I have better and bigger things." He signed the papers haphazardly and turned to face Candy, his voice unbelievably pleasant. "Now I can finally be with someone I truly love. Someone worthy of me." With trembling hands, I collected the papers and left the cafe. Behind me, I heard Jack laughing mockingly, but I turned away. I achieved my goal. My divorce was filed the following day. I felt a burden leave my shoulders as I gave the court clerk the documents. I could breathe again, for the first time in months. Justice often finds a way to get served in the most unexpected ways in life. I saw it as the headline, "Local Business Tycoon's Empire Crumbles. Nephew Left with Massive Debt," that appeared in the local newspaper. It came out that, in an attempt to grow the company, Uncle Robert had taken out a massive loan shortly before he passed away. During our hospital visit, he had mentioned something about a new project, but Tommy and I weren't aware of the consequences at the time. Everything made obvious now. I stood by and saw Jack's new life fall apart around him. He sold everything, the vehicles, the mansion, the factory. He was nevertheless left with a debt of around $1 million. The final flourish? Candy, his young bride, grabbed her luggage and departed the scene. Jack wasn't the rich guy she had assumed he was, she realized. If I claimed I didn't get a slight sense of fulfillment, I would be lying. It seems like Jack's karma had finally caught up with him. Then there was a knock at my door one wet evening. When I opened it, Jack was standing there and didn't resemble the arrogant, well-to-do man who had dumped me months earlier. His hair was untidy, and his red-rimmed eyes exuded desperation. "Rita," he murmured, his voice wavering. I really am such a fool, now that I see it. Could we please have a conversation? I let him in, against my better judgment. I listened to Jack pour out his heart for the next hour. He related to me how he had lost everything and come to understand what was really important in life. I was wrong, Rita, he pleaded, his eyes widening. Very incorrect. However, I now realize that you were the only person who ever showed me genuine concern and affection. Then, to my complete surprise, Jack dropped on one knee and produced a tiny velvet box. Please give me another chance, Rita. Remarry me. When we work together, we can conquer anything. I remained silent for a while. Then I did something that really startled me. I started to giggle. I laughed a little at first, but then my cheeks began to well up with tears. Laughing. Jack's expression darkened. What's so funny? I met his gaze directly when I had at last gathered my breath. Oh, Jack, were you really expecting it to be that simple? That when things went rough, you could treat me like trash, discard me, and then come crawling back? His face grew serious. He growled and leaped to his feet, saying, Now listen here. This is also my home. I am entitled to certain privileges. I quietly strolled up to the drawer containing our divorce documents, took them out, and showed him his signature. No, you don't, Jack. You gave up ownership of this house by signing. I now own it. Leave, or I'll contact the police. I briefly believed he may try to argue more, but my expression must have given him the impression that I meant business. He turned and rushed out, slamming the door behind him without further word. I called Tommy as soon as he left and told him everything. As always, my amazing son was very supportive. Mom, you made the right decision, he added. I'm proud of you. I treasured those remarks more than he will ever know. Over the next few weeks, I made some significant choices. The house felt too enormous for me alone, with all of its memories, both good and bad. So I sold it and used the proceeds to purchase a comfortable apartment in a lively neighborhood that I had always adored. I'm discovering that life is only getting started at 60. I've begun my travels, visiting all the sites Jack had always said we would, but we never got around to. I've joined a reading group, picked up painting, and even given salsa dancing a go. I see glimpses of Jack all over town every now and again. His faults and tribulations have worn him down, making him appear older. Although my expectations for life were not met, guess what? There's no way I would have it otherwise, because I'm really, fully, contentedly me right now, for the first time in a long time.